So far, we have talked a lot about effective metrics, how they help you monitor and track performance, set goals, and demonstrate improvements over time. But in practice, we rarely look at raw metrics alone. Instead, we use dashboards to provide a consolidated and interactive view of your metrics. So in this last part of the training, we'll take a look at some worst practices in dashboarding, which is a more visual and slightly fun way to share tips and tricks for building clear, useful dashboards. Let's start with the first dashboarding worst practice, something that we've all already seen. A tool packed with colors, charts, and data everywhere. At first glance, it looks impressive. Shiny dashboards tend to grab attention, but that doesn't mean they're useful. Remember the goal question metric framework? Your stakeholders probably care more about the goals and key questions than about every individual metric you've ever tracked. So dashboards that are overloaded with metrics can actually hurt more than help. Instead, I'd recommend a layered approach. So start by showing the minimum necessary information focused on a goal, and then allow users to interact or drill down into more detail if necessary. By the way, the screenshots shown here are just examples that I use for illustration purposes, not a critique of the tools. The next common mistake in dashboarding is creating a one-size-fits-all dashboard. The reality is, different stakeholders care about different things. Each person on your executive board will likely want to see different data. For instance, your Chief Information Security Officer will be focused on things like exploitable vulnerabilities and mean time to resolve incidents. Your Chief Technology Officer might care more about patch velocity and how efficient is the overall build and deploy pipeline. Your CEO is likely interested in a very high-level overview of how teams are improving and how efficient the overall security program is. So, know your audience when building dashboards is the key message here. The third don't on our list is manual updating dashboards. In general, you want to automate your dashboards as much as possible. And make sure that the automation runs fast enough. Take the Log4j vulnerability as an example. It was exploited just 12 hours after it was disclosed. If your vulnerability dashboard updates once a week, that's way too late. Another example that I've seen, where speed of update was not really an issue, an organization was manually creating dashboards every quarter to report their assessment scores. Now, to be fair, as I've said, speed was not an issue, so the update cadence was quarterly, and there weren't many scores to start with. But because it was done manually, a small mistake slipped in and the wrong data was reported to the board. So the key takeaway here is simple: automation ensures timeliness and consistency. If your dashboards require an extensive manual, you might want to rethink that dashboard. Here's an example from our own SAMM tool where this chart compares absolute SAMM scores across various teams. But when we shared this with typical users, the first question they asked was, what does it actually mean? Are these numbers good or bad? What is the industry benchmark? And what's the risk level for each team? If a chart raises more questions than it answers, it's probably not doing a good job. When building dashboards, aim them to be clear, crystal clear, even if it means including what feels like obvious information. Take this chart, for instance, and imagine if one of these teams would score 3.0. But unless you tell the viewer, which is not shown here, that the maximum possible score is 3, they're left wondering, is 3 good? Is that out of 5, out of 10? So assume no one is reading the manual and design your dashboards to be as self-explanatory as possible. The last thing to avoid when building dashboards is frequent changes. In general, you want to work with stable metrics and KPIs that are well thought out from the start. No experimentation on the fly. Constantly changing dashboards confuses users and undermines the trust in your data. So a more suitable time to revisit your dashboards is when you're updating your strategic plan. That is the moment to review what metrics and KPIs have worked, which ones are less useful, and where you need to adjust or refine. From there, define your new metrics and KPIs, and before rolling them out widely, consider testing them with a smaller group to iron out some issues and get early feedback. Let's wrap up this section with a few final takeaways on dashboarding. Dashboards are not just about making things look pretty, they are about enabling better decisions. And to do that, you need to keep your dashboards focused. Less is more. Don't overload them with data. Tailor your dashboards to your audience. One dashboard is unlikely to fit all. Automate updates wherever possible to avoid delays and human error in your metrics reflecting on dashboards. Make sure your dashboards are self-explanatory. And finally, avoid constant changes, stick with stable and meaningful metrics.